hope you can all see really well. Did you bring your baseball caps? I won't mind if you do this the whole time. Well, yeah, great. Yeah, we were just talking about Captain America back there, so it fits the topic of the day. Okay, thanks for coming. Welcome to the second of the senior art exhibitions. I'm Eric Oren. I teach in the art department here, in the studio art department, and I kind of facilitate the senior exhibition portion of our capstone program. So this is the capstone experience of the studio art major here at Bethany Lutheran College. So tonight we will hear art lectures by Leah Kurth, Joey Steinbach, and Hannah Rank, in that order. And then I always forget to say this, but please join us for a reception after these lectures, and feel free to ask each artist questions after their presentations. They're ready for this. They've been planning to answer all these questions. So anyway, our presenters tonight, the first is Leah Kurth. She's from Wausau, Wisconsin. She went to Wausau East High School and graduated in 2010. After Leah presents, we'll have Joey Steinbach. Joey's from New Ulm, Minnesota. He was a graduate, 2010 graduate of Minnesota Valley Lutheran High School. And last will be Hannah Rank, who's from Scarville, Iowa. She went to Lake Mills High School in Lake Mills, Iowa, graduating in 2010. So let's welcome Leah Kurth.
I grew up in Wausau, Wisconsin, like Professor Orn said, and went to Wausau East High School. A Spanish minor accompanies my studio art major. My favorite color is blue. My mother's maiden name is Cobes. And if I have special talent, well, I can't whistle or juggle, but I can name the 50 states in alphabetical order, so that's something for a resume. I've always enjoyed art and drawing and filled my notebooks with doodles and comics growing up. In high school, I took a variety of classes, from calculus to poetry, since I, like most teenagers, didn't know what to do with my life and wanted to keep my options open. When I took my first drawing class, I got great encouragement to continue, and by the time I started looking at colleges, I had decided that art was something I wanted to do as a career, and have grown and flourished as an artist and as a person through my studies here at Bethany. For my senior studio art capstone project, I decided to create a series of illustrations based on a compelling narrative. I was taught a love of books from an early age, from picture books to comics to novels, and traveled to new worlds through the imaginations of C.S. Lewis, Bill Watterson, Hans Christian Andersen, and many others. Stories in general often focus on the battle between good and evil, with the most engaging narratives blurring the lines between these two sides. These tales are not only more realistic, but allow the audience to connect on a deeper level. Some of my favorite stories contain characters who undergo these inward struggles, such as Gollum in Lord of the Rings, Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series, and Prince Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Another story that explores this struggle is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I chose this book as the subject of my illustrations, firstly because I wanted a story that I was familiar with but had not been made into a blockbuster film, since I did not want to compete with an already widely accepted visual style. I enjoyed reading it in middle school. It is visually stimulating with engaging symbols and motifs. It conveys deep themes using character and plot development, and it is well known enough by the general populace to be recognizable. Because its main theme covers the struggle between good and evil, this book is commonly read in middle school and high school, though it is relevant and timeless story for all ages. The author, William Golding, was experienced enough in the subject of good and evil, having fought in World War II for 6 years. The war had a great effect on Golding, as he said, "World War II was the turning point for me. I began to see what people were capable of doing. Anyone who moved through those years without understanding that man produces evil as a bee produces honey must have been blind or wrong in the head." His experiences as a teacher after the war also influenced this view. He once allowed a class of boys complete freedom in a debate and had to intervene as mayhem broke out. That incident and his war experiences inspired Lord of the Flies. Golding published 16 works in all, most of them investigating the presence of an innate evil in man beneath a facade of civilization, concluding that man's inclination for evil is far greater than it is for goodness. Often accompanying this dominant theme is his concern with the questions of original sin and man's free will. Though he was a pronounced atheist, these philosophies match the Christian point of view from the Bible. As stated in Genesis 8:21, "For every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood." Golding stands out with these beliefs, challenging the ideas of many important thinkers throughout history, including Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the most influential philosophers of modern times, who believed in the theory of tabula rasa, or blank slate, which states that people are born pure and become corrupted by the evils of society. Golding's work plainly states that humans are naturally corrupt. He demonstrates how man is inherently evil from childhood in Lord of the Flies. At first, the boys follow the rules of society, but as the novel moves forward, they forget their old lives and collapse into chaos and savagery. I found this story to be great creative fodder because of its rich themes and a good challenge to depict visually. I see art as visual problem solving. The artist has something they want to say and must come up with the best way to say it, whether their work is representational or abstract, commercial or fine art, a standalone piece, or a series. It's all about communication. An illustration is the means to communicate a narrative. In my series, the style I use to depict each chapter is important for telling the story. The general layout for each piece, which contains several scenes combined into one image, was decided upon so that the content of a chapter as a whole could be depicted in a more visually interesting manner than if I only showed a single scene for each piece. The main inspiration for this style comes from the American children's book illustrator Jan Brett. The most characteristic element of her works is the use of borders around a central image on each page, which she uses to convey mood, hint at what has, is, or will be happening, and add cultural flair. For example, Annie and the Wild Animals is a story about a little Norwegian girl who sets out corn cakes to lure in a new pet after her cat disappears. Borders surround the central images, letting the viewer know what animal will arrive next, show what is happening to the lost cat, and provide interesting design elements. Another children's book illustrator I drew inspiration from is Brian Selznick, award-winning artist and Caldecott Medal winner. His illustrations are highly detailed and precise, often making use of rich textures and graphic elements to further the story's visual design or plot. Both of these illustrators influenced my childhood drawing style and this project. Another great influence for this project are polyptychs, which I have studied in art history courses. Polyptychs are multi-paneled works often done as altarpieces. Some of the most famous include the Ghent altarpiece by Hubert and Jan van Eyck, and the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. The one most famous on Bethany's campus would be the triptych in Trinity Chapel by Professor Kowski. I was able to study and view such works during my time studying abroad in Spain during the spring semester of 2013. One unit of my modern Spanish art history course, covering the Renaissance through the Baroque period, which I took abroad, focused on retablos, which loosely means behind the altar. These structures combine architectural, painted, and/or sculptural elements to create an elaborately detailed piece which often takes up an entire wall. A retablo is often presented as a narrative series, with many sections of paintings or sculptures representing a single story or related stories, all woven together to create a single spectacle. These influences inspired me to create chapter headings that use multiple panels within one image to convey the plot. These pieces were created using watercolors and colored pencils on watercolor paper, with minor modifications done in Photoshop before being printed. The scenes and compositions were carefully chosen to accurately portray what happens in each chapter without revealing its entire content or contain spoilers. For those who have yet to read it, Lord of the Flies is the story of a group of British schoolboys living during an unspecified nuclear war whose plane has crash-landed on an uninhabited island, leaving them to govern themselves without an adult authority figure. It follows their struggle to survive on the island, with the main theme attempting to trace the defects of society back to the defects of human nature, showing how man, regardless of age or upbringing, will descend into chaos and evil when left to his own devices. You won't be able to glean the whole plot from my illustrations, so don't worry, you can get a taste from the art and go off and read the book unspoiled. This project has been a great contribution to my artistic journey, as I seek to one day become a concept artist for a film or game industry. With my skills in technical drawing, idea development, and a variety of mediums, from painting and sculpture to design and animation, I hope to break into the creative industry and work my way up through hard work and determination. I would love a career that allows me to flex my creative muscles and come up with clever solutions for narrative works. This project would not have been possible without the help and encouragement of many individuals. Thanks to my mom and dad for your wisdom and encouragement throughout my life, and especially during my college years. You guys are pretty awesome. A huge thank you to my lovely roommate, best friend, and main model for this series, Mariah Barker. If Professor Pete Bladel is in the audience, I think she deserves some extra credit in acting too. You can see here. Not many people would be excited about being turned into a group of 12-year-old boys, but you were ready and eager and willing to put up with my requests. Thank you, of course, to the fantastic faculty and staff here at Bethany. This place wouldn't be the same without your kindness and dedication you have for your students. I especially thank Professors Bill Bukowski and Andy Obern for all their help and wisdom throughout my college career. I thank God for richly blessing me, and to all of you for coming out tonight to support us artists. Thank you. Okay, now if you got any questions for me, let at it.
What's the next work or type of work that you, if you had a chance to illustrate, would love to do? If some author or whatever publisher came to you and said, we'd love you to illustrate such and such.
Oh, well, leaving it open for anything, well. Something fun, something fantastical. My dream job would be to work for Pixar or a related film or video game company to help them develop stories and come up with, cool characters and plot twists and all that fun stuff. Right now, college student, open for anything, don't want to be that starving artist. But yeah, some cool.
You had said you might want to work for Pixar. Is there one specific Pixar film where you watch it and you're like, man, I want to be an artist for these guys, or is it just all of them in general, or what?
Well, all of them in general. I really liked Up. I thought he was, cute and clever, and they always say, look at the first 8 minutes of this, it's better than all the Twilight books combined. But yeah, I love the artistic style that they use for it. Great plot, great characters. So. Well, as Andy Obern always says, no one cares about the labor, they just want to see the baby. But I would say probably an average of 20 hours for each one. So, but it's fun. Labor of love. Okay. Good.
We talk about the lots of it's a very unique style. And so in the U.S., I'm like, how would you try and find your student styles? Specifically, those
I feel that I've yet to develop a distinct style. I just kind of, that's how I draw, so that's how I draw. I would like to develop my style more, especially with characters. Yeah, so I'm still working on it.
Just from what you said, it seems that you're pretty interested in the literary aspect of subjects you work on. I guess in your view, what's
Well, different stories are more likely to have illustrations than others. Like, a children's book, you're going to have illustrations because it helps, the little ones follow along. And art and history was used to help illiterate people, follow Bible stories and such. I think that art and words go hand in hand. They lend themselves to each other. They show someone a different way to interpret the text. But at the same time, novels just on their own, if you have a good imagination, you can come up with things that, no artist could actually draw. I think, art with literature, art as a storytelling means is pretty cool, and it's what I'm most interested in. Father.
What's your favorite color of M&M?
My favorite color of M&M?
And what does that say about
Do you want me to make something up? Or blue M&Ms. Blue as the sky. The sky is endless. Possibilities of life are endless.
So you guys can talk amongst yourselves, introduce yourselves to each other if you don't know each other. I'm Joey, by the way. I'm serious, you can talk now. Hey guys, could I have your attention? Gosh, I'm nervous. Are you guys nervous? Pretty nervous. Okay, so, welcome to my art lecture. My name is Joey Steinbach. I guess a few things about me. I'm 22. I'm from New Ulm. When I graduate, my degree will say a major in studio art and a minor in sociology and art history. Eventually I want to go to a graduate program for art history and museum studies, which hopefully will land me a dream job at a famous museum as a museum curator. And also I get very nervous in front of crowds, so bear with me. Okay, so you guys have probably had a chance to look at my gallery, and I'm sure you're all thinking, this stuff's really weird. I don't get it, and that isn't art. This is stupid. What I'm here to say, dude, modern art has value too. I'd say that this kind of falls in the realm of modern art. And when you think of modern art, generally you think of people like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning and Barnett Newman, who, when you see their work, you automatically think, my kid could make that. That's the go-to saying. But there's a lot of value in modern art, and I think it's difficult to understand, and that's why a lot of people don't like it. But the characteristics that make it difficult are that, as compared to academic art, modern art is a lot more formal. So, for example, with P.F. Mondrian, when I say formal, I don't mean like academic styled or like suit and tie. I mean dealing with forms like shapes, line, and color. It's art looking at itself as an object. It's also really abstract, which is not something I'm used to dealing with. So you can maybe make out what it is, but it's not about what it is. It's about the brushstrokes and the paint and the expression of color. It's also modern art is also difficult because it's for its own sake, and I'm sure you've heard the term art for art's sake before. A good example of this is James Whistler's portrait of his mother, and it doesn't have any narrative. It doesn't give any like moral background to it. It's just a painting of his mom, and that's what it is. It's a painting to be a painting. And probably the most difficult part about modern art is that it challenges the conventions of traditional art. So like, what we're used to is the Mona Lisa, and you can't see it very well because of my college projector screen here. But it's a portrait of, well, it's the Mona Lisa, but it's a postcard that Marcel Duchamp got a hold of, and he drew a mustache and a beard on it. And he was basically just criticizing art from the past because he was trying to redefine art, and that's one of modern art's main goals. So with all these things, it's really difficult to empathize with and gain anything from modern art sometimes. It took me 4 years to even like begin to understand this, and even 2 years to begin appreciating it. So I was trying to think of a way that I could present this to maybe open up your mind a little bit, and as German, Norwegian, Swedish people, the best way I can think to put this is art is like potatoes. Which sounds stupid, but in a lot of ways it's true. So basically, up until the 19th century, art was basically all trying to do the same thing. They were trying to portray this ideal of beauty. They were trying to recreate nature, make things look as realistic as possible. And that's all fine and good, but eventually it wasn't enough. So like, much like art, potatoes span like cultures and nations and different peoples. So people around the world were doing basically the same art, even though it's a little different. Like some people were like, man, your potatoes are awesome, they're red. Oh, sweet potatoes, those taste awesome. Your potatoes are purple and yellow, that's wild. But in the end, it all comes down to that they're still potatoes. Just like all art was trying to do the same thing up until around the 19th century. Then this guy named Gustave Courbet came along, and his thing was, what if we didn't make really dry, boring academic paintings of fruit, or of aristocrats, or like famous people? What if it was just about the common person? So he would paint these scenes of people just doing everyday things. They weren't beautiful, sometimes they were pretty ugly, but like he wanted to make art more accessible. It was more about the people. That didn't end up too well for him, and he ended up dying alone in Switzerland in exile. But that was basically his way of saying, what if we baked the potato? And this idea was revolutionary. Although it didn't work out too well for him, it sent ripples into the future that would affect famous artists like Degas, Renoir, and Monet. This is my favorite picture. But they thought, this guy had something going. Like, what if we didn't have to make these paintings, just make them look as realistic as possible? What if we made it about the paint? What if we made it about the expression and the brushstrokes? And this is what basically evolved and moved art forward. This became modern art. And at first people didn't like it. People were like, this makes me uncomfortable. Like, can we just go back to regular potatoes? Because their taste buds hadn't really developed yet to start to appreciate the complex flavors that they're creating. So like, say, with the baked potato, there's like butter and there's sour cream and there's chives, and they're not used to that. They want their still life. They want their potato. But when they step back and they take a look at it, they'll see, well, I guess I really like butter. I guess I really like sour cream. Okay, I guess I'll give it a shot. And they end up getting a lot of satisfaction from it. And that's basically how art progressed. They kept pushing and pushing the envelope until art basically had been fully defined, and they were making things like, you know, lefse and dumplings and other delicious potato-based things like that. But there's a lot of works. There's a lot of work that goes into making those things. Like, you know, you gotta, I don't know how to make lefse, but all the steps in lefse, that's all these steps that are going into making modern art. Like, I'll use my figures for an example. If you compare them to French fries, it's like, you got your French fries, it's like, okay, that's weird, what'd you do to my potato? And you're like, okay, so you cut it up, you bathed it in salt, and you fried it. Okay, I guess I get that. And if you look at here, at these three figures, you analyze it and you say, okay, so why is it made from plastered bandages? That's kind of weird. But then you rack your brain and you think, okay, so what do you think, like what implications go with having plastered bandages? Plastered bandages are only used for like medical gauze, for making casts, for keeping things confined and rigid. So there's that aspect. And you're like, okay, so they're human forms. What does that tell us? Human forms, you know, they can deal with humanity as a whole, or can deal with like individuals. It deals with us. So now you have these two elements, two ingredients, and you see how they work together. So confined, ourselves, art, I start to see where you're coming from. And then there's all the different colors. And if you read my artist statement over there, I'm using color as an analogy for identity. So now you have these three parts, and then you analyze everything else, and you eventually come to this conclusion. It's a lot of work, and a lot of the times it's really difficult, and you have to concentrate really hard. But in the end, you can get something from it. It's basically like making French fries. There's a lot of steps that go into it. It's kind of weird sometimes, but in the end, you get this satisfying feeling that, you know, you just had this moment, you had this moment that you couldn't communicate verbally with this art, this modern art. So that's why art's like potatoes. I guess at this point I'll kind of go on to say more about my influences. I, like any other generic artist, I suppose, I started doodling at a young age. I would draw on my homework and my tests from first grade on. And it bothered a lot of teachers, but a lot of them actually encouraged me, and I think that was a really big step towards me choosing to pursue art academically. I didn't really think about pursuing art as a study until probably my last year of high school. My art teacher was Jason Jasperson, and he encouraged me in a lot of ways to continue what I was doing. It was actually through him that I found out that a lot of my creative process deals with experimentation and play. Because, I don't know, the things I did in senior art were just weird. At one point I put an egg through a printing press. I was dropping paint from ladders onto canvases. I made easily over 100 paper airplanes. Which sounds like I'm slacking, but in reality it's boosting my creativity. It's motivating me to make serious and meaningful works of art. So that's kind of a lot where this exhibition came from, like with the portraits on the wall there. And I cannot thank my friends enough for putting up with the weird things I told them to do, but yeah, my friends were a huge, huge help on what I did, and my experimentation and play that I learned later on in high school was a huge influence on this exhibition. Another really big influence for me actually was when I got to college, my freshman year. My RA was Daniel Ruiz, and his major was sociology. And I'd never even heard of sociology, but he told me more about it, and I like instantly fell in love with it. It's the study of humans, it's the study of us. I couldn't think of a more practical application to art than sociology, because I've really been interested in making really broad works of art that apply to a lot of people. So I started reading up, and one guy that primarily influenced me was Irving Goffman. He is a sociologist from the 19th century, I think, and he came up with this theory of dramaturgy, which basically said that based on the different social situation we're in, the different cultural context, we're different people from day to day, from situation to situation. And that stuck with me because it raised a lot of questions, like, which one of these identities are we? Do we have like a true self per se? Like, who are we when we're alone? Are we anyone? And it's these kind of questions that was a huge influence on me creating a lot of these plaster cast figures. Another art sociologist that really influenced me was Max Weber, he had this theory of the iron cage, which basically said that as humans, we build up society around us, we build up culture. And in return, this culture is like influencing us, and we're building it up around us, and it's inescapable. Like, we're creating that which creates us, which was the primary influence for the piece that's over by the window with the girl with the outlet plugged into her spine. And that was probably one of my favorite things to work on. I feel like it turned out really well. It's this constant interplay of the energy is coming from the person, but the TVs are casting these different colors on them, being all these different influences, so it's just this endless cycle that really accurately portrays Max Weber's iron cage theory. I guess other than that, I learned a lot doing this. In the end, I put in far too many hours to count. I used over a mile of plaster bandages, spent way too much money, but in the end, I definitely say it's all worth it. And I'm really happy that you guys came. Thank you so much, and I really hope that you enjoyed the gallery. So. At this point, I'll take any questions.
How would Max Weber be portrayed as Potato?
Probably Mr. Potato Head with a lot of different pieces. Well,
So you said you enjoyed the art of modern art. But earlier you did say that modern art is alien for a lot of people don't get it. So how do you put those two pieces together and then you expand it? Does modern art have a responsibility to make people get it, or can it be art? Does art have a responsibility to make people get it?
sure. Yeah, I think something that really unfortunate that's happened is modern art has become super exclusive. It's become really academic, and there was a video that Eric showed us in class one day that was basically an animation of this guy just saying a bunch of really, really, really complex and really long artistic words that meant nothing because he just kept like saying them over and over again. Unless you had gone through graduate school, none of it would have made sense. And I feel like that's what happens a lot of the time. It's people just being really, I don't want to say pretentious, but really exclusive about the whole thing. And that's why I decided to include the little bit of potatoes in my lecture, because it is difficult, but I feel like you can take a lot from it. There's a lot of satisfaction and edification you can get from it. And I do sincerely hope that in the future modern art becomes a lot more accessible and a lot more easy to understand, if that makes sense. And that's on both parts, the artistic world and the viewing world. But yeah, if that answered your question.
I kind of had a question. First of all, I want to say I appreciate your motive behind the art. Like often you said, like sometimes it comes off as pretentious. That it's like, well, if you don't get it, you don't deserve to get it. And it's like, okay, but like you and me have talked about this before, where it's like art isn't exclusive to the obscure. It doesn't have to be weird to be art. And I appreciate you trying to bridge the gap for me and so many others. And secondly, how do you mentioned some artists on there like Marcel Duchamp and others that sometimes associated with the Dadaist movement. What is your opinion of the Dadaist movement?
Oh man. Don't get me started. I am not a fan of the Dada movement. It's basically an anti-art movement that's, I guess in the context of the time it made sense, that was around pop art with people like Andy Warhol, and quite frankly, I hate Andy Warhol. I don't know. I don't think he was a good influence on art, but he happened, so I guess you have to appreciate him at least. But no, I don't like the Dadaist movement. Anybody else?
You're doing modern art. Is the challenge when you do something more for yourself or for the person that's giving you?
I guess I'd say a little of both. One of my biggest concerns with this, and I said this to a lot of people that helped me work on this, I really want it to be readable. I want it to be accessible. I knew I was going to give this gallery talk, so I gave it a little bit of leeway in terms of being difficult to read, but I do, being a sociologist, I do really want art to be able to be readable by everybody. That was one of my goals. And I hope I was able to achieve that today, but that was definitely something that I was concerned about a lot when I was making this.
Some of the ones that you pointed out are on a larger scale. We tend to gravitate toward larger scale pieces. And another follow-up question to that, is there, artists, we love to just create without thinking of the commercial element involved here, and the sale element involved. Is there a point at which you start to say, I have to scale things back to make them more accessible in terms of people buying them? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I did think about that, and I do realize that nobody's going to buy these. I don't know.
I'm not saying that.
I'm saying that. It's I don't see a big market for plaster figures covered in chalkboard paint with chalk on them. Yeah, it's a pretty small market, and like I said earlier, I don't really plan on pursuing. I don't plan on going the starving artist route. I'll still make art, but I think it'll be more for leisure and for myself than it would be for an occupation. I do love to make things, but I also like to be not hindered by thinking about who's going to buy this, which obviously would be a problem because you can only make things as long as you have money. But I've found that I'm a lot more interested in the professional, as a profession, the study of art, as compared to the practice of art. I find being an artist is stressful. The last 2 weeks before this was due was pretty wild. I don't ever want to do that again. It was a rush, but I'm glad I'm done with it. That being said, I do like to make things. And in the end, I think that, I didn't address the size. I do like working large. I feel like I think it stemmed from when I used to be really into drawing. And for some reason, when I draw small, I just get the proportions all wrong. And I think I just have a really broad stroke. My lines are thick, so I don't get the detail I want. So I just started drawing larger, and that ended up fixing the problem. And I think that just kind of carried over into my other works too. I like the idea of having life-size to larger than life-size work. I've always found it more interesting than if I were to make a smaller scale work.
Obviously, you know that you're using both for your cast. Is there, and now with your teaching, that I can kind of record a lot between these two back here and that you should have
No, yeah, there's definitely ties. At one point, I thought of attaching the frames in the back as almost like a triptych almost, but that would add a whole different context. So I ended up just, the correlation is that these two are using basically the same, they're basically saying the same thing, whereas the one over there is a little bit different and the one up there is a little bit different. These two are both utilizing the metaphor of we're all these different, for example, the paintings. Each color is a different identity that we have. At the end of the day, which one are we? Or are we just a conglomerate of all these? Are we the average of this? Or are we the negative space? Are we none of this? And that's kind of what the figures were talking about too, with the blankness on top, kind of leaving that open slate, so to speak. And the head's always associated with identity. You recognize people by their face. So if I made the faces generic and not colored, that raised that question of, who are we at the end of the day when all these different influences are scribbled on us. So I liked how those two work together. Also, wall space was pretty limited. Please.
So you mentioned at the very beginning that
Yeah.
where is your dream? If you could, or for any museum, anywhere.
Well, I mean, why not shoot for the stars? Let's go for the Louvre. I don't know. I guess if I would only count ones that I've been to, the idea of working for the MIA, even though it's smaller and not as prestigious, is also really appealing just because, you know, I was born and raised in Minnesota, and I kind of, like, that's the museum I've been to the most, and I feel like I know the best. So it'd be really nice to work there, but otherwise, when we were over in Italy, that was pretty sweet. I guess, heck, why not the Uffizi? But more realistically, the MIA.
Can you explain the process of the paintings a little more? Like, what did you ask your friends to do, and how did they do it? Or what did you do?
Well, so basically, I had 4 colors of paint for each of them, and I just laid the foam board on the ground, and I said, all right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to paint different surfaces of your body in different colors, and I just want you to move around the canvas. I left the interpretation of the movement up to them, which is why you get such a variation in the patterns and the intensity of them. Which, look, knowing the personalities of the people that did it, it totally makes sense, which was really cool to see. But yeah, I just kind of left the motion of it up to them, and then I just covered different surfaces of their body in paint, and then it just kind of turned out how it turned out.
Since you're making distinctions between things that came before modern art, I mean, how much of this to you is like picture making, and how much of this to you is like finding out something that you didn't know, which is a pretty good, another one of those kind of breaks in between those two styles.
So are you saying, like, how, like, are you commenting on the fact that this could be just an illustration of sociological ideas as compared to an artistic concept?
Well, that, or, you know, if people are looking at this, do you see this as that kind of picture making in the traditional style, or is this something else? And is it a way for you of finding out what you think about these things? Or where's your practice then? Where does that fall?
Sure. Well, like I said, I would like to work really experimentally, and I'm really satisfied with how it turned out. But yeah, I definitely feel, I mean, there is an element of picture making to it, but in a lot of ways, it is kind of its own thing. Could you repeat the question?
And maybe I'm asking a little more than you probably have time to think about, but it's more trying to me, this is more about finding out things than trying to make a picture for people to go, oh, I recognize that. You know, so it's something that you're looking at that not only are you learning from, but the viewer is learning something from that they didn't know or hadn't seen before.
Sure. Yeah, it was all very fluid, and as those figures went through a few different stages, and as I learned more about them, I was like, no, this isn't going to work. No, this isn't going to work. So there's 2 or 3 layers on those, and yeah, definitely. In a lot of cases, the works just kind of created themselves. I had different plans for the ones upstairs, but those ones ended up turning out a lot different than I had originally planned them. But I'm really satisfied with how they turned out. Happy accidents, as artists call it.
So, how would you prefer
Well, I guess if I could choose any potato, I mean, you can't go wrong with some good french fries. Like some super salty, super crisp French fries. Perfect. Anybody else? It's my mom. She's my birth giver. Anyone else? All right, if there's no more questions, thanks, guys.
All right, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'll never look at potatoes the same way again, so thanks for that, Joey. I would just like to thank everyone for coming out here tonight. I know Thursday night isn't always the most convenient time of the week to come to something like this, but it definitely means a lot to all of us, for everyone who came. And for all of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Rank. I am a senior here at Bethany Lutheran College. And my works are the large images around the room and the paintings as well. Just some background information about myself. Like many students who come to Bethany, I too came from a Lutheran-based education. I am from a tiny town near the border of Iowa and Minnesota called Scarville, Iowa. This is where I went to school for grades kindergarten through 8th grade in a one-room schoolhouse. And I graduated the 8th grade with only one other person who happened to have her own show a couple weeks ago, Sophia Fogstead. So a little shout out to a fellow Scarville graduate of mine. And usually when I tell people that I come from a one-room schoolhouse, they're kind of surprised they're still around, or like a lot of my friends, they kind of give me grief and ask me, are you sure you weren't homeschooled? Or like, no, I was not homeschooled. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But even though school was tiny, I definitely was able to benefit from it with a more one-on-one atmosphere, which was awesome. I really enjoy that. That's one of the main reasons why I like Bethany as well. Very hands-on with the professors, which was very beneficial to me. And even though we were a small school, we still had as many opportunities as the public schools did. One of them was entering art into a student art show in Albert Lea, Minnesota. This is where it all kind of started with my love of art. I had entered my drawing of the character Nala from The Lion King. You might know who that is. And I actually was able to win an award for my age group. It was only simply a ribbon next to my drawing, but you know, at the age of 9, it was pretty cool to me, so I enjoyed it. Then after Scarville, I transitioned to a very different atmosphere. I attended a community high school in Lake Mills, which wasn't all that big compared to other high schools, but you know, compared to one-room schoolhouse, it was a little intimidating going there. But I continued to take art classes every semester and was able to explore different mediums of art, including painting, drawing, ceramics, and graphic design. There I entered another art contest. This time it was statewide, and a panel of jurors actually picked the pieces that were sent in, and those that were picked were displayed in the McNider Art Museum in Mason City, Iowa. And one of my paintings was actually picked, so I was pretty lucky there. So from an early age, I have always been interested in art, but when I went to Bethany, I had never really considered studio art to be my main focus and my major. I had always loved it, but you know, never considered any kind of career choice through it. So right away, freshman year, I had started out as a biology major to pursue marine biology and zoology because simply I love animals and I love, you know, the yearly Shark Week and National Geographic and all that cool stuff. But turns out collegiate level science classes are really hard. So I kind of took a different route on that. So after considering my options and several phone calls with my mom, wildlife photography kind of just popped into my head. Like I would be able to do, be around animals, and photography is a form of art, and so why not pursue a studio art major? So that is what I did at the end of my second semester, my freshman year. And though I loved art, my favorite medium being painting, I never really experienced photography in the sense of it being art. What I initially wanted to do was more along the lines of journalism, but I was interested in experiencing photography in its many facets. I had no experience with a camera besides the generic disposable cameras, so jumping into photography classes was a bit of a challenge, but I loved the fact that I was learning how to make my own images and develop my own film, and just how the whole process worked. And it was really interesting how starting off in film photography in the first class, and how everything just correlated to with each other, working up to digital photography. It really gave me a good grasp on the art of it and just really appreciate for it. I also found out taking art classes at a collegiate level was incredibly eye-opening. Prior to Bethany, I never really had much of a critique besides someone saying, oh, I like that piece of art, or I don't like that piece of art. Never really going into detail as to why you may or may not like it. So right away, I had to build a bit of a hard outer shell and just take criticism with a grain of salt, so to say. But despite that, I'd say one of the most challenging things with being a studio art major is just finding your own style and figuring out what you like to do. So being able to explore different mediums throughout the several classes here at Bethany definitely gave me a good idea of what mediums I liked and which ones I didn't like so much. And one of my breakthroughs actually in my studio art career happened in painting 3 just a couple semesters ago. I began to paint images of flowers. Initially it was more of a realist style, and it kind of evolved into focusing more on different brush strokes and looking at each individual color in a different way. This style eventually evolved into more of an abstract style when I began to look more into shapes and zooming in on one area of an everyday object that posed an interesting abstract quality. This is primarily the reason why I chose to display both my capstone project and a number of paintings I've done within the last 2 semesters. I'm really excited about what I've been able to accomplish within the last year or so in painting, and it's definitely one of my prouder moments in my college career. I've kind of just found my niche in my paintings, so that was very exciting for me. Another obstacle that I had to go through for this project is what exactly I wanted to do for my capstone. I had figured out I wanted to do photography as my medium, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I considered what is important to me and what has kind of influenced me and how I would portray it in a photograph. Something that's always kind of bugged me living in Iowa was the fact that everyone thinks it's so boring. And yes, we have a lot of corn and beans and pigs and cows, but it's not all farming, I promise you. And that is what a lot of, the majority of my project was. The idea just popped in my head because I just wanted to show through my images that Iowa is in fact not boring, and you should go to all these awesome places around the state. But I wanted to show people not only these, touristy sites, but there's a lot of natural beauty in the state itself. and that's just something I wanted people to see. So my next step was trying to get people to be interested in Iowa. I researched several tourist attractions around the state and decided that would be my main focus. However, since these were, stationary places and very large visiting places, I found it difficult because you don't have a lot of artistic freedom with it, just because of the fact if I wanted to incorporate the whole site, I had to find a way to do it where it wouldn't look so much as a touristy kind of snapshot. So that was a big obstacle for me. So I did want to add another level to it. And I didn't want to just simply print these images and frame them and hang them up. I wanted to incorporate, like I said, the landscape and more of the natural, God-made beauty of the state. So initially I considered a collage of images, but I like the idea of my foreground image breaking so you can see past it and look at the background as well, so it all correlates together. So I came up with the idea of 2 different levels of images, and they would be plastered on 2 different sets of plywood, and they would be separate from each other, but overall one image. I decided to do it all by hand, besides the printing, of course, which was risky considering I had never done anything like this before, but I was willing to dive in and just figure it out step by step. Personally, I find it's a lot more rewarding to be able to make each piece on my own, rather than having a second party print it for me and I just simply hang them. Even though it would have saved me countless of hours if I would have done it that way. But I'm glad I went the route I did. This way I definitely can portray my concept a lot better. So it definitely turned out in the end. And I definitely could have done several things differently, but like I said, it was a learning process, and it definitely helped me grow despite them as an artist, just learning from my mistakes, and in the future I'll know if I were to ever do something like this again, I just will have a lot more better grasp on it, so to say. But after all of that, I have learned many things, even within the past year from this project, as well as the past 4 years here at Bethany. But the majority of what I've learned has been through my several classes with my professors. So I just would like to thank all of you for pushing me and all of us art students to get stuff done and just being there to help when we need it, offering criticism even when we don't want to hear it, and just pushing us to be a better artist, so to say. So thank you for everything that you guys have done. And of course, I would just like to thank my parents for always encouraging me and having faith in me and in my abilities, even when I didn't have faith in myself sometimes. But definitely they definitely have been helping the past 4 years with everything. So just like to thank everyone for listening tonight, and that's all I have to say. So. And now you can ask questions if you want.
These are images of tourists, you got to wait for a time of day when there are more people around, or did you have to just move like that in? Okay, there's nobody here.
Let's see.
Did you have to take
Several
care
of-
of the morning, the day?
Yeah, several of the places were a little busier, like the Field of Dreams back in the corner and the Grotto of Redemption. Those probably had the most people there, and the bridge actually. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of just waiting for people to move or just timing. So that was another obstacle that I had to go through. But otherwise, this one is out in the middle of a field somewhere. That's where Billy Holly's plane crashed. So there's no one there when I went, or at John Wayne's house. But otherwise, it wasn't too bad, I guess. But yeah.
When you're working with two images, one on top of the other, do you think ahead of time what the top image is going to be sitting on, or do you match that later? How do you do that?
At first, well, I had photographed all of the sites, and then it was a couple months into the semester that I decided to do the two images, so then I went out and took more pictures, and then from that, I decided what I wanted with each image, so definitely put some thought into which ones go with which, so. No. Well, I don't think, no, I haven't seen anything like it, but initially I was going to do something like this. I was going to put a large background image and then just simply collage the front one together. But then, like I said, I like the fact that they're separate and then you can see through them. So I've been working with plywood a lot the last couple of semesters for some reason, and it just popped in my head. So, yep, that and back.
It's a really cool idea, and I like the pictures a lot. Do you think you're going to make more of them? And if you were, what do you think you would do differently?
Well, if anyone asks me to make them, yeah, I would, but it took a long time. But if I were to do it again, one of the issues was bubbling from the surface, so just try to work on the bubbling part, I guess. I don't know how to fix that. And then, smart person I am, I didn't paint the edges black until after the images were painted on, so I would paint the edges black before I put the images on. I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but that probably took me at least 12 hours just painting the edges, and it wasn't fun, but yeah.
So what's next for you? What would you like to be doing after school?
As of now, I'm planning to take at least a year off. I'm kind of sick of school right now, honestly. But I hope to go and get my master's in education, and I'm interested in becoming an elementary art teacher because I love kids. Or if, National Graphic calls me, I just go work for them. I don't see that happening since I live in Iowa, so we'll see. Denise? Yeah, I should have done that. It was probably at least, in one day I traveled about 8 hours between just going from 3 different sites, and then it was about 3 hours back up to my parents' house, and then, probably close to 20 hours in the car. One day I had my dog with me, so that made it a little better. But otherwise, I was usually by myself, and just kind of, I don't know, had a lot of thinking time, so, to myself. Yeah, it was a lot of hours put into just getting there, so, yeah.
I don't mean to trivialize these for you and all, but they are really nice and unique and very Iowa-Asian. I can easily see, it's so nice. They have that big, beautiful rest stop on 35. These would be awesome in there.
Yeah, definitely looking into different galleries to show them. So that's actually one of my assignments that I have to keep doing. You didn't hear that, Denise, but yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely looking into different places in Iowa because I would hope someone would be interested. It's Iowa. so. Katie?
Well, the landscapes are something new that I've seen from you. And you said you like the wildlife photography. If you had a choice, you would pursue that over, say, family portraits of nieces and nephews? Or what, I guess, what would you prefer more, like having your own studio somewhere to do family portraits?
Well, I think I would, if I did have a wildlife photography job that paid well, I could do both, so. Right now, I'd be really interested in wildlife photography just because I'm young and still have some energy, so. But then I guess I'd need energy to put up with your children too, so. Just kidding, I love them all. Eric, back.
I think the photographs are very successful, but we're also kind of skirting around the paintings, which I really like, especially like that one up on top. What, do you see yourself continuing to paint and in this same style? Or is this something that is going to kind of fall by the wayside as you go along with no energy and
No,
rent to pay?
I definitely will continue to paint. It's something I've enjoyed even before I started doing photography, and I think painting really helped with photography and vice versa, just because you just start seeing things in a different way. And I think that's how my abstract pieces started to play out from that. So I definitely will continue to paint and also do photography. So, yeah. Any more questions? All right, thank you, everyone.
We always ask you at the end.
Oh, hello.